My friends, do you remember the legendary game-changer weapons? I'm talking about the military equipment NATO delivered to Ukraine. All the weapons that PowerPoint presentations once promised would drive the Russian army all the way back to Siberia. And trust me, the hype was real. Javelins, M777, HIMARS, M1A1 Abrams. Some like the Leopard 2 even arrived with their own cinematic trailers. Welcome to HistoryLegends. In today's video, we'll rank all of Ukraine's game-changer weapons on this beautiful tier list. From F, the ones that performed the worst, press F for Wunderwaffen, all the way to S tier, NATO weaponry that actually delivered. For nostalgia purposes, we'll go in chronological order of introduction on the battlefield. And as always, let me know in the comment section how you would rank these game-changer weapons. With that being said, I know one item that I would immediately place in my personal S tier. Come here, come closer. Why is nobody talking about the hidden performance experiments connected to the US military? Just listen to what Tony Robbins had to say.
For 2 years, top secret, they have been working with our military, with our special forces. And about a month and a half ago in Boston, the commander got so excited, he slipped the beans. And it was just in the Daily Mail last week as well. He didn't tell all of it, and I know more because I've invested in the company, and I can't tell you the exact things, but I can tell you what's been reported. What's been reported is the commander said, these are the strongest humans alive, both men and women in the special forces, the most fit people, right? Endurance has exploded, he said, very much like the mice. He said, secondly, muscle development has completely changed from the same stimulus, like the same workout, they're getting more muscle. And then thirdly, the most important thing for them is cognition has gone through the roof, because when you're exhausted and you're out there in special forces, the ability to use your head is the most more valuable than your body.
So when Tony Robbins is talking about this, he's not talking about hype. He's talking about a compound that restores mitochondrial function, meaning your cells regain the ability to turn energy production on and off efficiently again. And the key is this: NMN by Black Forest. David Sinclair, a biologist specialized in aging, tested this compound on mice. When he gave them NMN within just 14 days, those mice were running 200 to 300% more than even the youngest and strongest ones in the group. Now here's the part where most people get confused. NAD is a molecule you have a ton of when you're young, but by the time you hit around 40, your NAD levels are cut in half. And that decline is one of the main triggers of aging. Your energy drops, recovery drops. Now a lot of people think they can just take NAD directly and get all the anti-aging and energy benefits. No, it's more complicated than that. Check out how biologist Gary Brecka explained it.
You know, NAD, it's actually not NAD, it's NAD+, and that little positive is the reduced form of NAD, which means that charge can't really pass through first-pass metabolism. You can't just drop NAD into the stomach, it will just immediately dissociate.
That's why your body needs NMN like this one by Black Forest. Because NMN is the precursor your cells convert into NAD naturally. A Harvard clinical trial found that 1000 milligrams of NMN daily safely increased NAD+ levels by up to 2 times. Researchers also observed reduction in fat mass, cholesterol, and blood pressure, confirming NMN's potential to reverse key markers of metabolic aging. So if you're interested and want to try some NMN, I'll leave a link down below. But the best part is that Black Forest just released their biggest sale of the year, and it's insane. Buy one, get one completely for free in their best-selling NMN supplement. Available for 48 hours only. Yes, you heard that right. Buy one, get one free on their flagship NMN product. Link will be in the description below. Let's start with the FGM-148 Javelin. Here from the National Interest, February 28, 2022. Ukrainians are cleverly using Javelin missiles to destroy Russian armor. The Javelin is a portable fire-and-forget anti-tank guided missile, or ATGM, with an effective range of 2,500 meters. The warhead is capable of penetrating over 600 millimeters of rolled homogeneous armor behind ERA. This US-made ATGM defined the opening weeks of the Ukraine war. And that's how Javelins were the first game-changer weapons presented to the public. We were told these anti-tank guided missiles were responsible for halting entire Russian armored columns in Kyiv and Kharkiv. Viral videos of Ukrainian troops ambushing T-72s and BMPs in open terrain made it iconic. These feats of arms even earned it the nickname Saint Javelin. Some dude even made a fortune with this. Now, Javelin missiles could be effective in the first months of 2022 when the war was mobile and consisted of skirmishes and ambushes. However, the battlefield prominence of the Javelin declined sharply by mid-2022. And by that point, it had become extremely rare on the battlefield. Low inventory is one reason. In this article from Forbes, we learned that as of October 2024, according to Pentagon figures, the US has supplied more than 10,000 Javelins, plus 9,000 older tow-guided missiles. Thing is, Javelins also come at a steep $200,000 apiece. And by May 2022, it was reported that the US had depleted 1/3 of its global Javelin inventory. The other reason for the Javelin losing its importance in Ukraine, well, it's that it kinda sucks. Forbes even wrote that the success rate of this ATGM was close to 7%. 7%! Javelin missiles only hit their targets 1 in 14 times. Even Nigerian sorcerers would have more impact on the battlefield. In this video from August 2022, we even see a Russian T-72 shrugging off a direct hit from a Javelin. I guess a more appropriate description for the Javelin should be fired and forget. It's not surprising because during my research, I realized most of the footage of Ukrainian troops firing Javelin missiles was against stationary targets, possibly armored vehicles that had already been immobilized and abandoned by its crews. In the summer of 2022, when trench warfare became the norm, Javelin ATGMs could no longer be used the way they once were. Soldiers had to operate this bulky system weighing 22 kilograms when loaded, exposing themselves to the need of a clear line of sight lock-on, while static lines limited Ukrainian opportunities to ambush vehicles at range. Not gonna lie, you had more chances of survival in the Japanese banzai attack. So for this reason, I give the Javelin ATGM a D in the tier list, simply because its prowess on the battlefield was largely exaggerated in the early months of the war, and now we barely see it being used anymore. In contrast, Ukrainian troops really liked the NLAW. The NLAW, or Next Generation Light Anti-Tank Weapon, is a disposable single-use shoulder-fired anti-tank weapon designed in Sweden in cooperation with the UK. The NLAW's guidance system is based on predicted line-of-sight technology. The operator tracks the target a couple seconds before firing, and the missile's guidance electronics record the aiming movement to calculate the predicted target route and flight path. And as opposed to the Javelin, we have a lot of footage proving its combat record on the battlefield. In this video from the 26th of February 2022, we can see a Ukrainian soldier fire an NLAW directly into a Russian armored column. Its advantage is clearly its short-range effectiveness. Here we have a first-person view. We can clearly see how it is fired in open terrain, with a resulting destroyed Russian armored vehicle right after. Due to its light weight, it was often used in ambushes. And the benefit was after firing the NLAW, you didn't have to carry it back to base. Its lightweight also made it more suitable for urban and close-quarters combat, such as providing direct fire support for the infantry. Feedback was overwhelmingly positive. This Ukrainian soldier called Viktor said, "This one was shot from this beautiful thing." Meanwhile, in November 2022, another Ukrainian soldier named Roman Trihomiets declared, "It was awesome, one shot, one hit." And like many infantrymen in the AFU, he liked the NLAW because it was so easy to use, as it takes less than a day to become proficient with this weapon. Imagine the IKEA instructions for the NLAW. Yep, sounds very straightforward. A senior Ukrainian military officer described it as the weapon of choice for troops and stated in March 2022 that it accounted for 30 to 40% of Russian tanks destroyed, and other sources mentioned a 90% hit rate. It's probably exaggerated, but at the same time, these guys were literally firing at point blank. However, just like the Javelin, its usage on the battlefield decreased with the shift from hit-and-run attacks to static warfare. And I found it very hard to find footage of NLAWs being used after 2022. I mean, there's this video from fall 2024 during the Battle of Tarietsk that I stumbled on, and this footage here where we can see Ukrainian special forces firing NLAWs near Stepnohirsk in fall 2025. And then the guy casually throws the tube out of the window afterwards like an empty Red Bull on a night out. At the same time, one explanation is that these days there are less Russian mechanized assaults to repulse. And if there is a mechanized assault, FPV drones and artillery can do the job. Now if armored vehicles do reach a tree line, I really doubt that Ukrainian Mobic will crawl out of his dugout and have the courage to point and shoot the NLAW at the enemy vehicle. Let's be honest, with such odds, the soldier will probably stay hidden or withdraw. There was also this story from February 2025, when a British soldier who has trained Ukrainians complained to the Sunday Telegraph that Kyiv's troops would use UK-donated NLAWs as if they were RPGs. Yeah, well, because that's what they're actually going to use on the battlefield. It's not as if the UK has sent to Ukraine tens of thousands of NLAWs. That's why from 2023 up until now, most Ukrainian assault units use Soviet-made RPGs during their attacks. I even asked a foreign fighter about it and he said, "You got the RPG-7s in abundance, they're cheaper, and also it isn't a single shot, which eases logistics." In the end, I would rank the NLAW as a good C. It's a good weapon for short-range combat, but once again, its high cost of $27,000 a round makes it highly prohibitive, something noticeably more expensive than many alternative options on the battlefield, such as RPGs or just FPV drones. Do you remember how the Turkish-made Bayraktar TB2 burst into the scene in early 2022? Everyone was talking about it. This unmanned combat aerial vehicle is capable of up to 27 hours of flight time, operating at altitudes around 18,000 to 25,000 feet, with a top speed of about 130 knots. After showing its effectiveness in the Nagorno-Karabakh war, hint against Armenian militias with no air defense, Bayraktar's racked up viral strike videos against Donbass separatist militias with no air defense. I guess it's just as impressive as hunting a deer at 10 meters from a heated cabin. In the first weeks of the war, TB2s exploited porous Russian air cover and thrived against exposed enemy armored columns and convoys firing their Rocket-San laser-guided munitions. The irony is that this column here was composed of multiple Buk M2 air defense systems. In this one, we can even observe how a Bayraktar sniped a Russian command post. And in this footage, it guides Ukrainian artillery fire on an enemy position. We can also mention how a Bayraktar TB2 proved decisive in finding and distracting the Moskva cruiser before it got sunk. Now, Ukraine entered the war with 20 TB2s, and this surged to an estimated 50 units via Turkish deliveries by mid-2022. But by fall, footage and mentions of this game-changer weapons plummeted. The reason is simple. Once again, by the summer of 2022, the front stabilized, and Russia finally deployed layered defenses made up of Buk M2s, Tor M2s, and S-400 systems, combined with improved radar and electronic warfare. This enabled Russian air defense units to successfully jam the TB2's GPS navigation and command data link channels. That's how, according to Oryx, Russia downed at least 26 TB2s between February 2022 and October 2023. In theory, by that point, Ukraine still had 2 dozens in storage. Yet, in May 2023, Business Insider wrote, Bayraktar TB2 drones were hailed as Ukraine's savior and the future of warfare. A year later, they've practically disappeared. As a relatively slow and low-flying UAV, it can become a target for a range of air defense systems that are well organized. Meanwhile, Ukrainian Colonel Volodymyr Valyor noted in November 2023, "For the TB2, I don't want to use the word useless, but it is hard to find situations where to use them." Yep, I totally get it. That's literally what I say about what I studied in university. Now that's why the AFU prefers to keep its remaining TB2 fleet for situational use. We did witness a resurgence of Bayraktar UCAVs on the Dnieper front in Kherson in the late summer of 2025. But it was really situational, and it most likely indicated porous Russian air defense in that sector. And so far in 2026, TB2s have been absent from the battlefield. So where should I place the Bayraktar TB2? Is it more of a game changer than the Javelin? I guess it's just as useless on the battlefield nowadays. Even if TB2s are still being used sporadically, it only operates in very specific missions against weak air defense. And let's be honest, the Ukrainians just make better drones. So by now, the TB2 is pretty much useless. It's very far from the Wunderwaffe that could turn the war around, so I rank the TB2 as a D. Yep, these grades are not very glorious. NATO expected at least a BBC, but all they got now is a DDC. The US military-industrial complex also tried to flex its muscles in drone warfare with the Switchblades, these portable, tube-launched loitering munitions. Switchblades were so effective in Afghanistan that these guys are now in charge of the country. It's in this post-Afghan war context that Switchblades were deployed with great fanfare in March 2022, as part of the US aid package with over 700 systems, mostly composed of Switchblade 300s. The move was met with a wave of enthusiasm. Some people seem to think the Switchblade was a super weapon that could win the war. Viral footage from May 2022 showed the 300 hitting a Russian machine gun nest in Kharkiv, and the 600 targeting a T-72 crew. But by fall 2022, sightings and reports faded sharply. A Ukrainian military drone developer told The Economist, "The Switchblade caused minimal damage when they hit their targets. When one hit the rear window of a minibus, the front windows didn't even shatter. Put simply, they were extremely underwhelming." Then, just like the Bayraktar TB2, Russian electronic warfare capabilities was the killer. Russian systems like the Krashuha 4 and Lear 3 jammed GPS and comms, spoofing signals to cause crashes or off-course flights. Borevik said that the Switchblades struggled against Russian electronic warfare. He added, "When we tested them, they glitched under jamming conditions." Not only that, but apparently operators couldn't even really control these drones. During an interview with the New York Times, Ukrainian soldiers complained that the Switchblade often navigates to pre-programmed targets. Literally like an NPC. For Ukraine, it became hard to justify such loitering munitions that cost a staggering $60,000 to $80,000 per unit, especially with such poor results to show for. The performance of the Switchblade was so bad that we don't even have a proper study on the battlefield effectiveness of this weapon. So what should we do with the Switchblade?
Right to jail.
Yeah, that's right. Let's put it right into F. Yep, it's not looking good for these NATO game-changer weapons. But spoilers, one weapon will redeem all of them. Number 4. Powerful American artillery enters the fight in Ukraine. How American M777 howitzers could turn the tide of Ukraine war. The M777 is a towed 155mm howitzer developed by BAE Systems, notable for its lightweight titanium construction weighing under 4,200 kilograms, making it highly mobile and air transportable compared to heavier predecessors. Although the M777 is manufactured in the US and acts as the main towed howitzer in the US military, it was actually designed in the United Kingdom.
Yeah, baby!
Spoilers, the bottom tier of the tier list will also be a US-UK joint venture. Ukraine received the first M777 howitzers in May 2022 from the US but also from Australia and Canada, for a total of 220 units delivered to Ukraine by 2025. The M777 howitzer has a range of about 25 kilometers and was praised for its mobility, precision, especially for its ability to fire GPS-guided munitions like Excalibur, making it a game-changer. The New York Times wrote, "In the artillery duels, soldiers value not just range but the ability to quickly hide and move guns and supporting vehicles. M777s have to be towed by trucks or pickups, and it takes time to mount and dismount. As you can imagine, if the vehicle gets destroyed or damaged, the artillery piece becomes a sitting duck. And let's just say that in Ukraine, the idea of quickly relocating howitzers is more complicated than in Arizona. Here, this artillery crew needed an MTLB to pull the gun out of the mud. And in this one, they needed a tank. Do you understand? A tank. The M777 was conceived to fire a small number of shells from a fixed position in support of ground forces. Essentially, the war in Afghanistan. However, the Ukraine war has shown the limits of this British-made howitzer. And let's just say it's not the only British-made system that will greatly underperform. No! In this article by United24, we learned that by October 2025, Ukrainian artillery crews preferred their own Bogdana artillery systems compared to the M777. Why is that? Why could it be? According to Oryx, the enemy managed to destroy 55 M777s, damaged another 46, and even capture 2. That's a rate of attrition of nearly 50%. Plot twist, Oryx stopped counting these in 2024. So in reality, many more M777s have been destroyed. And to support this argument, every week or so, Russian Telegram pages show yet another M777 that was destroyed. Plot twist number 2, a number of these M777s are actually high-quality fakes. Just like jerseys you can find while walking around in the Middle East. Look at this mock-up, it even releases smoke as if it had actually fired. And here the barrel's heating system is powered by a solar battery. Such tricks are designed to deceive the thermal imaging cameras of reconnaissance and strike drones, creating the illusion of a real, recently operated weapon. For example, in this drone footage, it's only during the edits that the Russian UAV team noticed that this M777 was actually a decoy. Now, what were the actual problems the AFU faced with the M777? First, the vulnerability to shrapnel and counter-battery fire. In an interview with National Defense, Ukrainian officials reported, "After every artillery contact, we have to take 2 artillery pieces and take them back to the rear to maintain them, because some of the subsystems are damaged by shrapnel," meaning 2 out of 6 artillery pieces in the battery are gone after every artillery duel. A battery commander told the Financial Times, "Show us at least one officer or sergeant in the American Army who has fired, for example, 5,000 to 7,000 rounds with this M777 howitzer." And this leads to unprecedented barrel wear. This was confirmed by TWZ. Ukraine is burning through 155mm M777 howitzer barrels so fast the US Army can't keep up. Yeah, barrels getting heated up so bad that you can't keep up. Reminds me of Colombia. Now, because of these high rates of fire, and degradation of the rifling and overall internal structure can lead to reduced range and accuracy, as well as the potential for catastrophic failure. Or here Defense Express reported to repair one M777 howitzer, you have to take components from the other 8 damaged ones. So spare parts scarcity leads to cannibalism of existing artillery pieces. But that's not all. This flop includes Excalibur GPS-guided artillery shells, which Ukraine doesn't want anymore. Not only do they cost 50 times more than unguided 155mm shells, but once again Russian jamming systems disrupts the shell's ability to lock onto coordinates, and then it follows the same ballistic trajectory as an unguided shell. Big L. So let's put the Excalibur in F. It was just a scam. And the M777 will be Javelin's and Bayraktar's roommate in the D tier. As of now, we cannot be too impressed by US-made weapons. Double D and F. Look, it won't be the only NATO game-changer weapons that will be living in this apartment. So please, America, leave some room for the others. The US military-industrial complex is really seething right now. While some NATO weapons disappointed, France's Caesar system distinguished itself on the battlefield. It didn't brag about its performance, and just mugged everyone once it raised its impressive cannon. The Caesar is a wheeled, self-propelled 155mm howitzer praised for its high mobility. It can deploy to fire in under 3 minutes, has a firing rate of 6 rounds per minute, and has a range of up to 42 kilometers with standard shells. The first 6 units arrived by late 2022, and the Caesar's debut in combat was publicly attested in mid-June 2022. Overall, Ukrainian artillery brigades are loving it, due to its perfect balance of mobility, accuracy, and survivability in a high-threat environment. This makes shoot-and-scoot tactics highly effective, and thus significantly reducing vulnerability to counter battery fire. And it shows in the data. As of late 2025, Ukraine received 120 Caesars, in 2 versions, the 6x6 Mark I and the 8x8 Tatra. According to the latest tally by Oryx, 26 Caesars have been destroyed or damaged. That means 22% losses due to enemy fire. Very reasonable when you ask me compared to the 50% of the M777. Ukrainian artillery crews like the intuitive fire control system, which saves a lot of time in a fire mission. The Caesar's built-in ballistic computer and digital interface allow a trained crew to calculate firing data, aim, and shoot in under 60 seconds after stopping. Maintenance is facilitated by its wheels instead of tracks, and also because of the fact that it uses common off-the-shelf truck components. After all, it's literally a gun mounted on a truck. And unlike the M777, the Caesar can easily fire more than its recommended 100 rounds limit. Ukrainian crews mentioned firing 200 shells a day without a problem, and that with extreme precision. That's not all, Ukrainian mechanics were also properly trained by the French military to repair any problem they encountered on these howitzers. Since the main advantage of the Caesar is mobility, its downside is the lack of armor. However, the entire point is to move before they get hit by the enemy's counter-battery fire. And enemy artillery shells start raining. The reinforced cabin seems to hold up pretty well, even against drones, very important nowadays. In the end, the battlefield performance of the Caesar is undeniable. Ukrainian gunners praised the Caesar howitzer's precision and mobility. The Caesar can always operate mud, swamp, rain, snow, frost. The self-propelled artillery system goes out and fires. And look, Ukraine just wants more and more of them. Lithuania just purchased 30 units. Croatia signed for 18. And listen to this. Even the US military is considering a massive order of 400 Caesars. Truly insane. Guys, I think we found our first NATO Wunderwaffe. I guess artillery is really France's expertise. As you've seen, Ukrainian artillerymen repeatedly said this is their favorite Western artillery system. And because of that, I think we can all agree that the Caesar deserves to sit on the throne and deserves the S tier mark. Next up, the German-made PZH 2000. It arrived on the battlefield in early June 2022. Contrary to the Caesar, these self-propelled howitzers are entirely armored and tracked. Overall, there are only 3 documented losses for the PZH 2000. Tier S. Move, bitch. Get out the way. Deutsche Qualität, right? Right? No, it's just a nightmare to operate. Ukrainian artillerymen complained that the German PZH 2000 has sensitive electronics that go haywire when exposed to moisture or dirt, which is the regular situation in Ukraine. The soldiers have to put on special boots or slippers when they go inside to avoid tracking in mud, and each vehicle comes with its own vacuum cleaner.
Oh, okay.
It's not even a joke, they're serious. One artillery commander called Mikola revealed that he and his men were struggling to clean out the barrel of their mud-encrusted howitzer with a long metal brush like a chimney sweep. He added, if you fire off 2 full loads of ammunition, you need to spend a day servicing it. 2 full loads a day and then rest. Yeah, sounds about right. But just like the M777, there are a lot of problems with the wear and tear of the barrels. Artillery units have to wait between 6 and 12 months for replacements because Germany's military production is so slow. Here's what Ukrainian artilleryman Bohdan Nahaj told Deutsche Welle. Software errors are the most frequent cause, and overheating of the control systems and gun barrels is also common. As a result, up to 2/3 of the German howitzers are temporarily unusable. Although the PZH 2000 is clearly, wow. You know what I mean. It's not all about looks. You will regret presenting it to your family. This howitzer is just unusable on the battlefield. For this reason, we have to give it the D. It's like that luxury German car that stays in the garage and only comes out on special occasions. Like oil changes. Oof, that prison cell is getting packed and we're just getting started. Now, knowing all this, we can even compare the German-made PZH 2000 to the Polish AHS Krab, a Frankenstein self-propelled howitzer that integrates a licensed British AS-90M Braveheart turret with a modified South Korean K9 Thunder chassis. Gun Commander Colucci of the 26th Artillery Brigade told our beloved Ukrainskaya Armia TV, I previously worked on the PZH 2000. In terms of assigned tasks, the Krab performs excellently. Compared with the PZH in its most important characteristic, accuracy, I find the Krab to be more precise. He also said he liked the Krab's MRSI mode, the ability to fire 3 shells at different trajectories, so that they strike the target at the same time. The gunner also recalled that, despite the PZH 2000's vulnerabilities during sustained firing, he achieved a higher daily rate of fire with it, up to 240 rounds in one day, compared with 140 rounds from the Krab howitzer. But at the same time, if you shoot more with the PZH, there are higher risks of failure, and then you have to wait half a year to get a replacement for your barrel. We're getting a lot of mixed reviews right now. Meanwhile, Andrei Kobzar from the 43rd Artillery Brigade had another analysis. He said, "I consider the Krab to be an unfinished, unthought out, and very rough machine." The Ukrainian gunner criticized the simpler interior, incomplete automatic loading system, and thinner armor compared to the PZH 2000. He also didn't like the Krab's uninsulated ammo storage that increased risk for the crew during drone strikes. The fact that Ukraine lost 43 Krabs destroyed or damaged shows that it spends much more time on the front line than the German-made self-propelled howitzer. However, 43 out of 70 delivered to Ukraine, it's still a staggering 60% losses. And Poland announced that the next batch of AHS Krabs will go to replenish the Polish army. As for maintenance, already in July 2023, it was reported that the AHS Krab is hard to repair in field conditions. Capital repairs always required evacuating the vehicle to the rear, and even some basic works were sometimes impossible to finish outdoors. Oftentimes, the damaged Krabs had to be transported to a secret facility in Poland, where each weapon can take up to 2 months to repair. But look, at least spare parts are available, eh? Look, it's very hard to rank. PZH 2000 stays in D. And as for the AHS Krabs, look, it's definitely better than the PZH 2000, but it's also not a marvel. So I think it deserves to be in the tier C. Not great, not terrible. Okay, this is gonna be the last one for today. Is this next NATO game changer weapon going to redeem the Made in USA trademark? Now it's time for the M142 HIMARS. The HIMARS, or High Mobility Artillery Rocket System, is a wheeled truck-mounted missile launcher that can fire multiple guided missiles in quick succession at ranges up to 90 kilometers. This allowed HIMARS launchers to fire without fearing counter-battery fire or drone interceptions. These US-made missile launchers entered the battlefield in a fury during the summer of 2022. Here from the 26th of June, we see the impact of a HIMARS strike on the command center of Russia's 20th Command Arms Army in Izium. There were also multiple strikes on enemy concentration of troops far from the front. Overall, Ukraine received 40 HIMARS, and they inflicted significant losses on the Russian armed forces. But it's really during the Kherson campaign that HIMARS earned the Game Changer title. And for a good reason. They repeatedly hit bridges essential to Russian logistics, such as the Antonivsky Bridge over the Dnieper River in Kherson. These strikes disrupted critical supply routes and thus isolated the Russian forces positioned on the west bank of the Dnieper River. Ultimately, in November 2022, it's because of these HIMARS strikes that the Russian contingent deployed in Kherson was forced to withdraw back to the east bank of the river, and where the front still stands today. We can say that the HIMARS was the architect of this decisive Ukrainian victory. Because of these successes, the NATOs appropriated the HIMARS as part of their iconography, just like they did with Saint Javelin a couple months before. And there was also this design that became very popular within NATO communities. But by 2023, we started seeing the first cracks. Here in May 2023, CNN reported, Russia's jamming of US-provided rocket systems complicates Ukraine's war effort. How's that possible? How could an army composed of prison inmates and mujiks armed with shovels bring down such high-tech US weaponry? In the article we can read, the medium-range rocket systems were hailed as a game-changer in the conflict, but in recent months the systems have been rendered increasingly less effective by the Russians' intensive blocking. As a result, even when they do function, the HIMARS have increasingly been missing targets, and it's said by 50 feet or 15 meters. That's the difference between a destroyed target and a damaged one. 1 year later, the Washington Post said something along the same lines. Russian jamming leaves some high-tech US weapons ineffective in Ukraine. A senior Ukrainian military official added, the Russians deployed electronic warfare, disabled satellite signals, and HIMARS became completely ineffective. And this forced the Ukrainians to now start striking lower priority targets with the HIMARS. And that explains why HIMARS were increasingly being used as high-end rocket artillery against enemy batteries. As part of some recent examples from the 5th of November 2025, where HIMARS targeted storage warehouses for Russian Get-On-2 near the Donetsk airport, or on the 14th of December when Russian UAV operators launching Molnia recon drones were targeted by HIMARS. The next day, the Luch thermal power plant in Belgorod Oblast is said to have been targeted by HIMARS as well. And because of that, Russian air defense units constantly have to remain alert to intercept enemy rockets. But the HIMARS myth of invincibility was shattered in March 2024, with the first confirmed destruction of this missile launcher. It was destroyed by a Russian Iskander-M while parking at a roadside. Since then, Oryx confirmed 4 units fully destroyed and another 4 damaged, or 20% of the total US deliveries. So by that point, HIMARS launchers were getting destroyed and their missiles were getting jammed. It's really hard to rank. Well, for all these reasons, I will rank the HIMARS as a B. Yeah, tier B. Actually, I think we can upgrade it to an A. The armed forces of Ukraine currently don't have a system that can replace it, and it's still being actively used on the battlefield. For example, here on the 20th of April, a HIMARS destroyed a warehouse of Russian turtle tanks, and 3 days later, on the 24th, it's a Russian PC-3B multiple rocket launcher that was destroyed. The HIMARS definitely redeemed US-made weapons. It's not an S tier simply because of Russian jamming capabilities, but it's nonetheless an excellent system. I think we'll stop here for today. So let's do a summary. Javelin tier D, NLAW B, Bayraktar TB2 D, Switchblade pure trash F, M777 D, Caesar S tier, PZH 2000 D, AHS Krab C, and at last HIMARS A tier. Now there's still many NATO game-changer weapons to explore, like the Patriot, the M2A2 Bradley, the Leopard 2, the F-16s, and many more. But that will be in part 2, so stay tuned. That's all I have for you today, and see you in the next one.